My guest today is Mike Phillips. Mike is the founder of marketingmuscle.online. He is a growth marketer, weightlifter, and content creator. He's worked in B2B revenue growth for the better part of 2 decades, and he's been creating content on LinkedIn and YouTube for over 4 years. So he is on a mission to close the gap between new and elite creators, and that's why he founded The Gym. It's a community for solopreneurs, freelancers, and other players in the creator economy to strengthen their success and boost their revenue. So let's jump right in. All right, Mike, thanks so much for being a guest today on my show. I'm excited to talk to you. It's been a while since we've connected.
Yes, it has. Yeah. A little bit.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you and I have one big thing in common that is the whole fitness piece. And I love that you call do you consider a company Marketing Muscle? How do you?
It's my brand identity. It's like a DBA. It's just the ethos that I wrapped all of the things that I do in.
So I love the Marketing Muscle as a brand. I mean, because it's just so relevant to what you and I are into as far as the fitness thing goes. So can you talk about the history of how this came about and include what your fitness background is a little bit that led to this?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Honestly, it's such a one of those stories where in the moment I had no clue what I was doing, but in hindsight, it's very clear how I got where I am. So it began like a lot of people who went online to build a digital presence in kind of early pandemic lockdown era, where I was previously B2B marketer in an office, just doing the B2B marketing world gig. And the job was unflexible. We'll never work from home. And then everybody had to work from home because there was no option.
Right.
And I never had a home office. I had a home gym. I had a power rack. I had some cables and dumbbell sets. I had a nook in the corner that probably would have had other equipment in it by now if I had not instead set it up as a home office / content studio. And I just did it out of necessity. I just carved out a space and just kept going to work, growing revenue and doing the thing. And at this time, I was also recovering from a pretty substantial injury. I had a pretty bad disc damage to my lumbar spine, my lower back. Oh. And while I was, as a kid, and I say kid like high school kid, a competitive power lifter, I hadn't lifted for some years because this disc injury just kept me out of anything with high load. And faced with infinite free time, nothing to do and nowhere to go, and existential dread, I just started reflecting on my life of what am I doing? And am I doing things that are, worth the time and worth the effort? And so I decided, I don't like having fallen out of shape, and I didn't like being in that place. And I also wanted to continue to advance myself professionally. So I took them both up as like one of those really big goals that you do in life. Like, I want to get into the best shape of my life. And I said, well, I have a herniated disc and I have to do physical therapy that's the only thing I'm able to do. And my job starts early and they're relentlessly monitoring my computer from home to make sure I'm actually there. So the only option I had was get up earlier. Mm-hmm. And so I just set really tiny goals of, I'm going to roll out of bed, and that's a success. And then I'm going to roll out of bed and then move to the yoga mat. And if I fall asleep again, that's okay. And then if I do some stretches on the yoga mat, that's okay. And then if I do stretches with elastic bands, and then a little bit of weight, and then a little bit of more weight, and then more exercises, and it just blossomed back into my re-entry into fitness. And while I'm not competitively powerlifting today, I'm definitely in my most well-rounded shape than I've ever been. And in lockstep to that, because I had nowhere else to go, it was pandemic and there was nothing else to do.
Right.
I was just working at marketing here, and next to my desk is my rack. And I just had this duality of like the tiny things that you do to improve yourself there. Every decision of, is this my last rep? Is this true failure, or am I not at true failure? All those tiny decisions compound to make progress. And I'm like, the same thing we do to build digital brands. I started just posting on LinkedIn, sharing a little bit of that, a little bit of what I'm learning in my job, a little bit of how marketing grows revenue, a little bit of B2B, strife, a little bit of all the different things that I could talk about. And over time, the metaphors just blended together. And I'm just like, I'm not sure if I'm writing about fitness or business anymore. Yeah. And around that time, this was probably December 2020, maybe before that, a few months before that, I decided like, I'm going to start posting every day and just see how long I can do it. Mm-hmm. And I did that for like 4 years. And like, here we are now. And somewhere along the way, I'm like, marketing muscle, it's alliteration. I'm a fitness person. I do marketing. I'm just going to use the hashtag. And that is the origin. It just started as my personal brand. And then since then, it just blossomed into so much more.
I love that because I've used that analogy with fitness and copywriting and fitness and business in general. And I think one of the biggest things, and tell me if you agree with this, with people who get in shape, and as someone who's a lifelong exerciser, and for decades, I've been into it. It's about the consistency, and it's about doing the little things and not letting any, self-perceived failures get you down. Like when you hurt your back, or when, even if you go on vacation and just take off a week from, exercising, and people tend to get lazy. It's like, well, I haven't done it for a week, so I'm just, I might as well forget it. And it's the same with business and what you're saying about posting on LinkedIn. It's like, what is it called? Habit stacking. I think it's a little bit different, but it's just adding those steps.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's so, the analogy, I'm clinically metaphorical is what I like to call myself. Like I fish for metaphors and I will torture them to the end of the day, but they dovetail without much forcing, I think, the way these things work. And, we talk about like trying to grow business or grow revenue. It's like we try a content series, or we try some different H1 copy, or we try an ad, or we try an email, and we try and we try and we do all these different tests and iterations and experiments. And there's no really, there's no moral equivalency in the experiment did not produce the results that we expected, right? It's like, I'm going to try to bench press 100 pounds. Did you do it or not? If you failed, are you morally a bad fitness person? No, you're somebody, you just put in another rep. You change the weight, you do it again. Or the next time that cycle comes around, you try it again. And let's see if you can get 3 instead of 2. Let's see if you can get 5 instead of 4, 12 instead of 11. It's just putting in the reps. And I feel like it's a platitude to say just put in the reps, but at the same time, it's for those of us who have done fitness, they understand each rep is that decision to commit to the bigger goal, even though in the moment it feels like it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And I've worked with people, as a personal trainer for 20 years, and the ones that really, that I can tell as soon as I meet somebody if they're going to stick with it or not. There's a certain personality. And I think it's the same with like I've been on LinkedIn consistently for going on, it's over 3 years, almost posting every day. I've faded out a little bit for various reasons. I've just been busy with other things, but it took 6 months before I saw anything really on LinkedIn as far as people responding. And it's hard. It's like the same with fitness. It's hard to hang in there when you're not getting feedback. It's hard to hang in there when you're not seeing results. And, I had a client once, I thought she was kidding me. I worked with her for 2 weeks. And she said, I get to her house and she said, I just want you to know I'm really disappointed in my progress. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, I expected to see something by now. I said, it's only been 2 weeks. I said, there's a lot of things happening to your nervous system, under the surface that you can't see. She didn't want to hear any of it. And she let me go. And there was nothing I could say. And it's like, I still can't get over that because I said, you're not serious. And she goes, I'm serious. And it's the same thing as getting on LinkedIn and expecting I'm going to post something and no one responded. So I'm just going to stop. And, it's the same thing.
And maybe you've experienced this. You said you experienced this too, that first 6 months. It's like, you're shouting into the void and you're like, wait a minute, there's hundreds of millions of active users on here. Can I not get a few of them? Can I not get some? Right. But that is the struggle of like, when you do content creation as like a way of getting some attention for your business, early on, like it's like building any, like you said, there's like neurological, right? There's like muscle memory you build, right? There's like this, the process of executing of it is something that you have to become conditioned to. You have to get used to it. And it's just, people drastically underestimate the amount of reps, the amount of volume they need to put out to learn these skills and to execute and refine them. And they drastically overestimate the perfectionism required to start.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will, I see I fought the demon myself of like resisting starting for years beforehand. I signed up for LinkedIn years before I started doing anything.
We all did,
with
I
it.
think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, oh yeah, that's where you park your resume and all the people you worked with, like a Rolodex, right? That's what it's for. But yeah, I think the folks like your client there are not necessarily incapable of learning the difference, but it's like there has to be the right intersection of being in the right state of mind mentally, and then in the right place to be able to execute on it. And when you have that intersection, you can really grow and do some impressive things in both business and fitness.
Yeah, exactly. And this also brings me to the fact that you can't, it's like when you get on LinkedIn and you have to sort of expect that it's going to take a while. So you need to find something that drives you to keep going. Like, what is it? I would tell my clients who were starting and they were not liking it, I'd say, okay, let's find something like for my own workouts. I love listening to my music. I have these tracks I listen to, and I like being around people. I don't really talk to anybody at my gym because I really am focused, but that's what gets me there. And so it's the same with like marketing or with like LinkedIn. What is it that will keep you in the game? I think is a question. I just kind of thought of this analogy when you were talking. Like, is it just like for me, like I love creating carousels. I just like the creativity of it. And I don't really care if I get a ton of interactions, but I like that creativity. So is this why, like, was you starting a community part of that? Like, what made you start your community?
It's related. I think what kept me, it's related in a way, and I'll tell just a very brief anecdote of like how it happened. So like what kept me going in business, or like in posting and in finding my voice online and finding my brand and how I wanted to position myself and believing that I had enough expertise to even talk about it regularly. That process is very similar to like my recovery from injury. And it was just about breaking down, like setting that big vision. Everybody can think about something big they want to achieve, but breaking it down into steps that are just so small, they're almost impossible to fail. Mm-hmm. And so that's where like I talked about like my first goal. I think my first goal was even smaller than where I started that story. But my first goal was I said, okay, tomorrow I start getting in shape again. I have to get up at 5 a.m. I'm not a morning person. I'm very much a night owl, but I had to get up in order to get it done before work started. So I said, my goal is I will set an alarm. I will maintain consciousness long enough to put earbuds in my ears and have music on loud. And hopefully the music keeps me awake. And like, that was the goal. I set that. So I just, from that, like minimum amount of work, I did that. And then, okay. And then I will roll to the floor, and then I'm out of bed, successfully out of bed. That was the next day. The next day was on the floor. And then after I rolled to the floor like 2 or 3 days in a row, I'm like, okay, I can roll to something softer. So I went from the bed and just got up, kind of limped my way over to the gym, got in there and laid down on the yoga mat and then fell asleep. That process is what kept me going with content creation as well. And as I started building my brand, it was like, okay, I'm going to post every day and I want to build a huge following, or I want to build a brand. I didn't even fully understand the scope of what I was going for, but I knew kind of the direction, right? I knew where North was. I just didn't know like what the North Pole looked like. So like that was kind of where I was at. And I said, okay, I'm going to write about things that I see. And I did that for a bit, like things that I saw in marketing and B2B. And I said, okay, I'm going to go find other B2B people and I'm going to go listen in and talk to them. And I just started stacking up these tiny little things. And I didn't set rules so rigid that failure was likely. I tried to make everything so small and build in flexibility to it that you build kind of this momentum, right? So from that series of small wins, you find a rhythm of like, oh, I did a thing, and then I did another thing, and I did another thing. And it's like a metronome. You start feeling that. And from a rhythm, things can start to become autonomous, right? Once you have a rhythm and a groove going, you don't have to consciously choose to do it.
Right.
And when things become autonomous, you can then stack additional efforts on top of those that are conscious. So like posting became a background, like breathing. It was just part of a thing, my heart beating. It was just a thing that I did. And then I could start looking at, let me do some strategic outbound. Let me go find the right people who have influence in audiences that I care about and engage there. And then I did that consciously, but the posting was just like a heartbeat. It just kept going in the background. And like, that was how I moved forward. And like, I struggled. Like, I'm the only person in my physical IRL offline circle doing the content creation thing as seriously as I am, other than like posting about your lunch on Instagram or your cat on Facebook, right? Like, I don't know anybody else in my life doing this thing. And it took, it's been kind of a theme in my life that I've always had to provide that kind of internal motivation, whether it's in the gym, getting in shape. Like as a kid, I started lifting weights in 4th grade, being overweight, trying to, not be bullied. And then that just became part of my life. It became part of the background, right? The heartbeat in the background. But, while that is something that I've been able to do, I've always recognized that it was always harder to do it alone. And when you're in fitness, it's easier to go to the gym when somebody's there waiting for you.
Right.
When you got a training partner, right? When you have somebody who knows, that they know that you won't be there. Right. That somebody else will know that quiet promise you made to yourself of I will go to the gym. You can break the promise with yourself and nobody knows. But if somebody else knows, all of a sudden you've got this another layer of accountability. And as I was growing organically and building my brand and starting to grow the following on LinkedIn, eventually branching out to YouTube a little bit, I was like, okay, what would make this easier? And I'm like, a good training partner, like and not just like one, but like that community of people that you see at the gym. The person you don't know their name, but you're like, oh, hey, dude, that puts the weights back every time. You're nice. I appreciate you. Or, hey, over there, gal, who always is like the huge water bottle and it's like almost comically big. Like there's always like there's characters, right, even if you don't know each other's names, right? And I say this funny, recognizing that I had a home gym and I didn't have any of that. But it's like, I thought about the dynamic of it and I said, this is the sort of thing that, as I started forming those connections and having the private DMs with a few creators here and there about the work that we're doing and like the effort to show up, I said, there's something to this. And I started consulting a little bit. Like I did what everybody does. Like I threw up a quick, small app, buy an hour of my time and I'll work with you as a marketer, right? And most of the time when I'm working with people, the themes that kept coming back were not, how do I run this ad better? Or how do I write this copy better? Or how do I price my offer differently? Or how do I promote it? It was more of like, I just felt what they told me is that it just felt so good to talk to someone who understood.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, okay, there is a undercurrent of, I don't want to say not loneliness, but just that lack of belonging, the lack of validation of what you're doing. And I said, you know what? I'm good at this because I'm a relentlessly positive person, pragmatic, but I will not let you get negative with yourself. And that's kind of like my coaching mentality, right? And I was like, okay, how do I start reaching out to people and how do I start building this? And I thought about it. And I'm like, the right way to do this is it has to be bigger than me. It can't just be a cult of one. It can't just be my personality at the front of the pack. It can't be me being the magic. It has to be a culture, people, a belonging, the thing that we don't have offline. And we need to break time zones and geography and be able to pull people together. And the only model that serves that is an online community. And so that's where I, decided to go down that path. And that was, almost a year and a half ago now.
Yeah. And it's hard to do though. I mean, I know, cause I said this to you because I joined yours, like, I don't know, last year, as soon as you started it. And I haven't really been active because I belong to so many. And it's like what you said about LinkedIn kind of being like the heartbeat and like posting. It just, I have so many of them that I don't really know where to focus. And so that's where I kind of get lost. So I just don't do anything with any of them. Well, there's one, actually my podcast group with that I really like, because everyone there, like you said, we all understand what we're trying to do. And there's people of different, they're all in different points of their business. Like, I've had my podcast 3 years. Other people have had maybe just a year. Other people have had it longer. But we share ideas, what worked for you, what didn't work for you. Same with fitness. Right. The only thing is, in each case, what works for one person doesn't always work for another, especially with fitness. I mean, people listen to everyone, a celebrity did this, so I'm going to do that. Well, the backstory is completely different between the two of you. You don't know what they went through. But yeah, I love that analogy, though, of the having it be like the heartbeat. Because when you were talking, I was thinking about how people get motivated to work out. And like people say to me, I don't have any motivation to get out of bed to get to the gym. I just had a doctor tell me this the other day. I went for a checkup and and she asked me what I did. And I said, I used to be a trainer. And she's like, oh, that's how you got all that muscle, because she was doing something with my arm. And she goes, oh, I just can't do it. I don't have that kind of discipline. And I've been at it so long, and you're probably like this too. It's not something I think about. I get up, I put my clothes out in the morning. I get up at 4:15. I'm a morning person. And I'm at the gym by 5:30 or earlier. And I just do it, and it's sort of like, like this.
It's like, I always say that like motivation comes from progress, not the other way around. It's not that, you don't find motivation and then make progress towards a goal.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to take steps. And from the successful completion of those steps, you find more motivation. And so it's like, that's what it takes to kind of just break loose of the stagnation of like starting a new movement. And again, whether it's a new go-to-market movement or if it's a fitness goal, it's like I went to college for mathematics and engineering, and there's this random physical tidbit about friction, that the amount of friction that an object has sitting on a table when it's still, that you have to overcome to get it sliding on the table, right? If you have a brick on a carpet, right, that kind of friction to get it moving, that amount of force to start moving is always more than the amount of force it will take to keep it moving after it starts. Dynamic friction when it's moving is less than static friction before it starts moving. And that is true in life and fitness and business. The amount of effort it takes to break loose that first step will be greater than what it takes to sustain it. But by the very fact that you started, you now have proof that you have the power to sustain the movement going forward too. And so you have to kind of look for ways. That's why I take the goals so small, because it's easier to get started when you look at them that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what does a creator motion, like what is creator motion and what does it look like?
So it's in a nutshell, it's using content creation as a go-to-market strategy, right? So how do you go to the market that you want to engage? How do you get them to know you, like you, trust you, and ultimately buy from you? You can do this with events. You can do this with sales, outreach. And a creator motion is not necessarily new, but I think the term is probably more newly crystallized. And the motion itself is simply creating free, ungated, open to the world content on social media. Usually content creators are a social media driven bunch. Could also be blogging. Blogging counts as content creation. Podcasting counts as content creation. Using content as the leading movement, as the tip of the spear for you to go down that awareness, affinity, trust, and purchase funnel. And that doesn't mean that a creator motion means that you are monetizing through content. You can have a creator motion as a service provider, where you create content to accrue attention and get people to know you, like you, and trust you. Then you can convert that attention to another modality, like a podcast or a newsletter, which again is another form of content. And then you can offer them purchasing opportunities, or you can offer to meet up with them for a discovery call and then offer them. Like, there's a variety of follow-on motions you can do, but the creator motion itself is, how do I create value openly and freely in the social media or open content space? Again, podcasts, YouTube, all these different places count, and use that attention as a way to feed awareness, affinity, which is where people like you, and build trust for my brand, so that when it comes time to do business with me, I am top of mind for everybody who becomes in market, and they already like me, which means they have no resistances to understanding what I have to say. They trust me, which means they have lower price sensitivity, and they're more likely, therefore, to purchase from me. So it's about folding all the marketing psychology into the movement of showing up as a content creator. The only real difference between that and Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast monetizes through YouTube, or he did, at least at first, monetize through YouTube. Ad share, the platform monetization, is what the traditional model was. Now, the motion lets you monetize through whatever service or product that you offer.
Mm-hmm. So is this different than top of funnel? Like when you hear about...
Yeah, I would say not unrelated. It would just be a different way of looking. There's many different ways to pour things top of funnel, right? So you can accrue attention through organic or paid channels, or earned channels, right? Earned media is another option. Like right now, I'm on your podcast. This is earned media. I earned the opportunity to be on your channel. I could be running a LinkedIn ad to help point people at my community, the gym. or I could be posting organically to LinkedIn. And those are the main ways that you get top of funnel traffic. A creator motion is primarily the organic top of funnel, where they will be creating this content to create not just general awareness at the top of the funnel. The very beginning is people got to know you first, but also the content itself is a high touch point cadence where people can constantly see you in the feed daily or weekly or multiple times daily, whatever your cadence is. And that familiarity, that pattern starts to develop trust and affinity and understanding of your value proposition. So it's very much a top of funnel movement. But the difference is the bottom of funnel for a traditional content creator that monetizes through platform is the bottom of funnel is simply ad share revenue, maybe a Patreon account, maybe something like that. Like the subscribe, Patreon is extra, that sort of a model. But the bottom of funnel for creator motion can branch out and then be conversion over to sales offers of services and products as well.
Okay. That's interesting. So what about when we talk about B2B? So a lot of what we're talking about a lot can be for B2C or B2B, but what lessons can B2B learn from the creator economy?
It's funny. I started my whole journey writing exclusively about B2B marketing to other B2B marketers on LinkedIn about B2B marketing. Like my topic was just very focused in that space. And what I realized is that a lot of the things that B2B struggles with, like there's the old B2B is boring to boring, right? We have this stigma of oh, well, we're just going to talk about features and our people are different. They're serious buyers. So we're going to do case studies and statistics and nothing funny. We can't be, the funny is not allowed.
Right.
And what I also think there's a tonal struggle that B2B could benefit, because if you look at what is the most engaged content, it is content that is none of those things, that is directly useful or entertaining. And oftentimes I think B2B is so worried for some reason about releasing too much value up front that we err on the side of releasing none of it. Or we're so afraid of giving away the secret sauce of what it is that we produce or do to maybe one competitor who might care to know exactly how B2B is doing their thing. And therefore hundreds of thousands of potential customers don't get to hear anything about it. Right. And so that math doesn't square to me. Whereas creators take the perspective of, I don't care if I patent this. I don't care if I get a copyright on this. I don't care about any of that. Just say my name. Just give me the notoriety, because once you are top of mind and your brand becomes memorable, it doesn't matter where you go. If you're deplatformed, you transcend because you have permeated into the head share, the mind space of this person, of your buyer. And so that's the one piece of it, is it's this concept of how to produce it. And then the other thing is this concept of control. I think B2B struggles a lot with feeling that they want to steer the buyer journey themselves. Yeah. They're like, I want to talk to them on a sales call so that I can make sure they understand it the way I want them to understand it. Right? And the truth that I think B2B could take from the creator economy is that there is very much I have one hand on the wheel and my audience has the other hand on the wheel as far as steering this journey. I'm influencing it by what I say and what I do and how I show up and my branding and my word, my copywriting and all of that. But the audience talks to each other about you in the comments, even when you're not there, or off of your content when you're not somebody will text message somebody a link to your thing and you don't even know what they're saying about you. And I think embracing that you can't, that B2B doesn't anymore, because the power is shifted into the hands of the buyer, have this control over how someone moves along that buyer journey of oh, I will qualify them. I will move them to a sales call. I will determine when they're ready to buy. I will offer them and I will close them promptly with an incentive. There is no linearity to the creator economy. People see something here. They'll see a content in a feed, keep on scrolling. Later in the day, it pops back in their head. They Google it, go to the person's website. As far as B2B is concerned, that was a Google acquisition. But the reality is it was the content that drove it.
Right.
And I think learning from the creator economy that there is this collaborative and autonomous way of growing would open up a lot of doors for a lot of B2B service providers or product producers that I just think is not intuitive, because a lot of the B2B groupthink or the dogma of the industry is very much against that, because it's very much for measuring and attribution. And I think while that is important, and I professionally, I've been a growth marketer. Like I love my attribution and my optimization that I can do. There are oftentimes, it's better to look for proxy signals, look for other things you can measure that are indicative of the performance, than try to force the entire buyer journey into a process that fits the tools that you think you have access to. It's the wrong way around. You want to fit measurement to the process, not change the process to fit what you can measure.
Yeah,
I think in the end, those are some things that I would like to see B2B adopt more, because in the future, I think almost every dollar of GDP is going to have some touch point in the creator economy, either through influencers or thought leaders or brand partnerships or product placement or even like referrals and affiliates and like newsletter sponsorships, and all the things are going to have some touch points in the creator economy. So the sooner B2B, I think, can learn from the way these folks are doing business today, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And when you're talking too, I was thinking of an analogy with, I don't know if you follow like on the Food Channel, Guy Fieri. I'm not a particular fan. It's just always on.
I'm familiar. See, the brand awareness, even while watching regularly.
But he has this, one of his many shows, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, where he goes to different restaurants and he goes around with the chef, and they choose, like I've looked at some of the behind the scenes behind this, and they choose ahead of time, what recipes he's going to do with the chef. And the chef is telling exactly what goes into this mix. And part of me is thinking, I wonder if anybody pushes back. And occasionally you get somebody that says, I can't tell you everything in the spice mix because it's a family secret or something. Usually that's pretty rare. Right. But I'm thinking, I wonder if anyone has ever said, I'm not going to reveal my recipes, when there's also something called the 4 times effect that they've talked about on the show. Whatever business you have, if Guy Fieri shows up and features your restaurant, expect 4 times the business. So it's almost like, with somebody, because I've had clients that said, I don't want to reach out to or I don't want to tell my competitors who I'm currently working with, because I'm afraid they're going to try to steal my customers. I've had that. Right. And it's like, but then like what you just said, and now you're sacrificing all the people that could benefit from what you offer, because you're afraid of maybe one person, and it probably won't even happen, doing that.
Yeah. You have like 1 to 3 direct competitors that are actually direct competitors, maybe in a niche. And you're going to sacrifice every customer that could potentially be yours, knowing the most valuable decision-making factor.
Yeah.
That makes no sense, right? And that's the thing that, we talk about this in the gym community as far as like how people promote themselves and how they position their offers. And most of the people in there are either B2B or B2C or direct-to-consumer service or business providers using creator motions. But it's just like, even they feel this, like, because traditional, quote unquote, traditional, like big business advice is safeguard, attribute, and it's unfortunate that that's the mindset, because while that was true, maybe even as recently as 5 years ago, business has shifted, and the buyers in the driver's seat now, they have at least one hand on the wheel. And the best thing you can do now is equip them with as much information to make as informed a decision as possible, while becoming a liked and trusted source of that information, because that's how you stay top of mind. And that's where people who don't have budget all of a sudden find budget to work with you. Then it happens more than once to the members we've had in the community who are like, surprise, here's a 5-figure, contract now. And it's like, oh, okay. Why? And they're like, oh, I've been following you forever on LinkedIn. You haven't liked any of my posts. Like, oh, I don't like the post because then people see what I like.
Oh.
I will silently watch I will lurk.
Stalk you.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, that's with social media. When you like, especially on LinkedIn, if you like something, it's a public endorsement in a way. A comment is a really public endorsement.
Yeah.
So many people will consume what you create. Again, creator motion without engaging. But that doesn't mean that you're not affecting the buyer journey for the better and moving them towards wanting to work with you as soon as they enter into market.
And that circles all the way back to what I said initially about when you're working out, all those neurological changes that you can't see are happening under the surface. And then one day hey, I have a bicep, So,
Hey, 5 pounds never gets less than 5 pounds, right? The plate is what the plate is. When you like, this is a 5 pound plate. But does that mean that, 10 years of training down the road that the 5 pound feels heavy? No, it's not actually any lighter, but it feels that way because you've gotten stronger. And that's exactly how we improve.
that's awesome. Well, this has been such a fun conversation because we obviously used a ton of gym analogies, which, both of us love. But aside from that,
Yes.
it all made sense. And where can people find you and find out more about the gym and about, what you're all about and follow you?
For sure. Yeah, I'm an active creator on LinkedIn and YouTube. Both best ways to find me, it's either my name, Mike Phillips, or the channel name, and my hashtag for content on LinkedIn is #marketingmuscle. You can find me directly on my website. It's just marketingmuscle.online. And from there, it can link to the gym community if you want to learn more about how to do that. Joining is free. I designed it so that you could have a forever free tier or get an additional pro level amount of support if you want more meetings and accountability. And there's just so many different ways that we can support one another. I think that we always grow stronger together, and that is the mantra of the community for the skill building, the accountability, the support that we need across time zones and geography so that we can do the things that we need to do to succeed on our own terms.
That's awesome.
Marketingmuscle.online or LinkedIn or YouTube for my content.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes. So it'll be easy for people to find. Thank you so much, Mike. This has been great. I really appreciate taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun.